Welcome, friends. Glad you made it. Tonight's ride takes some strange turns, lonely roads, vanished things, and people that never should have been there. Buckle up. Let's begin. Story 1. Sticker on the stop sign. So back when I was like 20, I was coming back from a bonfire near the beach with some friends. We'd all been messing around and I had a bunch of 9/11 was an inside job stickers in my glove box. Don't ask why. Just one of those dumb things we thought was funny back then. It's about 2 a.m. I'm heading home, and it's pitch dark. I stop at a stop sign near my house and on a whim I grab one of those stickers and slap it right on the sign. Dumb, I know. I start driving again and like 10 seconds later, no exaggeration, 4 state troopers and 2 local cop cars come rolling up over the hill toward me. One by one they pass me. I'm sweating bullets at this point. But they keep going. As soon as their lights disappear in the rear view, I punch it and race to my driveway. Kill the lights, park, and sit there trying not to freak out. 15 seconds later, maybe less, 3 cop cars come screaming past my house, sirens blazing, headed the same direction I was going. I still have no idea if they were after me or if it was just a coincidence. But the real kicker, I'd been sipping tequila for like 6 hours and there was still half a bottle open in the back seat. If they'd stopped me, yeah, that could have ended real bad. Story 2. Flash of light driving back late one night with some friends. We were way out on this country road, middle of nowhere kind of thing. It's pitch dark. Not the kind of dark where you can see a bit in the distance. No, it was black out there. Suddenly I see this flash of light on the road ahead. It was quick, barely a glimpse, but enough to make me go, "What the hell was that?" Then one of my buddies says, "Whoa, did you see that big cat?" Another one says, "That wasn't a cat, man. That was something else." Cue a 30-minute debate in the car. We're all throwing out ideas, wild guesses. We end up naming it the Beast, half joking, half dead serious. You know how that goes. Couple days later I decide to do some digging online. Turns out there were actual sightings of a large black cat in the area, within 50 kilometers, around the same time frame we were out there. Real reports, not a joke. And the thing is, this was Ireland. We don't have panthers. Whatever we saw that night, I don't know, but it still messes with my head sometimes. Story 3. Boggy Creek Howl in the Woods. It was the night of July 3rd. I was driving home from the lake, cutting through the Ouachita Mountains, deep, thick woods, middle of nowhere. One-lane country road, the kind that looks like it hasn't been touched since the dinosaurs roamed. It was close to midnight, pitch black out. No one else around. Just me, my car, and the forest. Windows were down, trying to dry off from the lake. I couldn't go more than 25 miles per hour with the way the road was falling apart. Then out of nowhere, I hear it. This sound, loud enough to shake your bones. I don't even know what to call it. It wasn't a mountain lion. I've heard those before. This was deeper, a howl maybe. But it had this guttural, almost human-like edge to it. Long and low, and loud enough to make me freeze. I slammed the windows up so fast I nearly broke the switch, pushed the gas and noped out of there 60 miles back home. Didn't stop once. Here's the thing, it wasn't far from Fark, Arkansas. You know, the place that inspired the legend of Boggy Creek. Look it up. Folk monster. People around here talk about it like it's a joke, but after hearing that sound I don't think it's funny anymore. I'm never going back out there without a firearm. Not ever. Story 4. Bridge jumper in the Bronx. I was driving home from Connecticut around 3 in the morning, taking the Whitestone Bridge into the Bronx. It was quiet, raining hard, but the road was mostly empty. That's when I saw him. A guy, just standing there on the edge of the bridge, facing the road, not looking at the water, looking at the cars. I slowed down and pulled over, rolled down my window and asked if he was all right. He didn't say a word, just stared at me, for what felt like 15 full seconds. Then without a sound, He turned and jumped, right over the side. I didn't even move, just sat there frozen. The rain, the bridge, the water below, none of it made sense anymore. I still don't know if he hit the water or something else, like the support beams underneath. I looked it up later. People have died jumping from there. The East River's nothing to mess with. If the fall didn't end it, that water sure would have. To this day I still have nightmares about it. Story 5. Talking dog at abandoned hospital. This one isn't mine, but it happened to my friend, and knowing him I believe it. So his group decides they're gonna drive out to an old abandoned hospital. Just bored and looking for a place to smoke. One of those sketchy buildings at the edge of town that everyone says is haunted, but no one really checks it out. Anyway, he stays back in the car while the others go explore. He lights up, just chilling there alone in the driver's seat. Then clear as day he hears a man's voice, calm, not aggressive, say something like, "What do you think you're doing?" Naturally, he looks around. The voice came from just outside the window. But when he turns to look, it's not a man, it's a dog, just standing there, staring at him. And yay, I get it. He was high. That's what I told him too. But he swears that dog talked. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't freaking out. He was just certain. He starts honking the horn like mad, calling the others back. They searched the whole area, but there was no one else out there. No guy, no dog, nothing. To this day he still calls it the dog that asked a question. Story 6. The headless cat on a mountain road, with goat. This one happened in Japan, during winter. My boyfriend and I were driving through the mountains, snow-covered roads, no one else around. The kind of road where even the street lamps are spaced too far apart, so everything feels just a little off. We're driving slow, because it's icy and quiet, and that's when we see it. Up ahead, directly under one of the street lamps, there's this mound of snow. We get closer and slow down, trying to figure out what it is. It's a cat, but it's got no head. I don't mean mangled, I mean clean cut. No blood, just lying there like it's peacefully resting, except there's no head. Neither of us says anything for a while. I was sure my mind was playing tricks, but then I finally ask, "Did you see that?" And he nods, confirms it, no head. And that wasn't even the start of it. Before that we had stopped at the ruins of an old castle to take photos. And then on the way back he wanted to take me to a scenic overlook at the top of the mountain. No lights, shrines everywhere, just eerie silence and snow. He tells me to close my eyes. It's supposed to be a surprise. We stop the car, and while he gets out to pee, I open my eyes, and that's when I see it. An orange light, slowly circling in the road behind us, moving closer. There are no lights on this mountain, none. So what the hell was that? He gets back in the car, and I ask him. He saw it too, but didn't want to scare me. We peeled out of there as fast as we could. Didn't talk for a while. Didn't even breathe, really. Later that night, we found the headless cat, and after that, we didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. Story 7. The train that looped for hours. I was about 8 years old, riding home with my mom. It was late, around 12:30 a.m., and we were heading down Industrial Parkway. We pull up to some railroad tracks and stop, waiting for a train to pass. Normal stuff. The train rolls by, we sit for a second, and when it clears, Mom starts to go, but the crossing arms stay down. Weird, right? So we wait again. Another train passes. Same direction, same speed, same number of cars, and I know that because I always counted them. This happens again, and again. 4 more times. We wait for the train to pass. 6 total, and every time it's the exact same train. I'm not talking similar, I'm talking identical. Same number of cars, same rhythm, like someone hit a rewind button. Eventually, I turn to my mom to ask what's going on. And that's when I realize, she's asleep at the wheel, completely out, just slumped over, breathing steady like she's been asleep for a while. I shake her awake. She stirs, and when she looks at the clock, She freaks out. We had lost time. Neither of us could explain it. The tracks weren't broken. We weren't dreaming. But the arms stayed down, and the train just kept looping, over and over. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. But I'll never trust railroad crossings at night again. Story 8. Boy in the road disappears. Near San Diego, I was about 10 years old, staying with my aunt and uncle. One night, my aunt was driving me home, and we were cutting through this quiet stretch of road. Earlier that day, someone told me a little boy had died on that road, hit by a car or something. I don't remember all the details, but it stuck with me. Anyway, it's late. The road is mostly empty, and that's when we see him. A boy. He's just walking across the street, right in front of the car. My aunt slams on the brakes, screams, thinks she hit him. We both jump out, start looking. There's no one there. No blood, no body, no sign of anyone at all. We search up and down the street, under the car, in the bushes. Nothing. It's like he vanished. I don't remember the exact name of the road, but I know it was somewhere near San Diego. And the weirdest part is, I still live in California. Every now and then, when I drive past unfamiliar backroads at night, I wonder if that boy's still out there, just waiting to cross again. Story 9. The thing that crossed the road, I was about 7 or 8, riding in the front seat while my mom drove me home from a swim meet. It was around 10 p.m., and we were in this weirdly forested area, completely out of place for where we lived in New York. The road was narrow, no other cars, just trees for miles on either side. We were about halfway through the pass when my mom suddenly stopped the car. That's when we saw it. Some kind of humanoid figure came out of the woods and ran across the road right in front of us. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't any animal I'd ever seen. We just looked at each other. No words. Whatever that thing was, it didn't belong there. And it definitely wasn't something that's supposed to exist. Even now, whenever I drive that same road, I still catch myself watching the tree line, waiting. And what's worse, a little while after, someone posted a photo in the thread, said it reminded them of what I described. It was just a silhouette, but damn if it didn't match. Same shape, same kind of nightmare fuel. The thing I saw was darker than the trees around it. It had long limbs, almost ape-like, and it moved fast. I don't know what that was, but I know what I saw, and I still look for it, every single time I take that road. Story 10. The Westphalia. That wouldn't leave us alone. I was 17, doing a road trip across the states with a friend. At one point, there was this old beat-up Westphalia van behind us. Thought nothing of it at first, just figured it was some random traveler. We stopped in the next town that night, to set up camp. Nothing special, just a quick overnight, before heading on. But the next morning, as we were pulling out of the lot, there it was, the same Westphalia, parked nearby. No gear around it, no signs of life, just sitting there. Weird, but maybe a coincidence. A few days go by. We're deep in the Black Hills now. It's hot as hell, and we can't sleep, so we go for a walk outside the campsite. And that's when we see it again. Same exact Westphalia, parked just off the shoulder across from the campsite entrance. No one inside, no lights, no movement. We didn't say anything. We just looked at each other, turned around and started packing. Didn't matter how late it was. We left that night. It wasn't just a van anymore. It was something else, something wrong. And to this day, I still have no idea who was in that thing, or why they kept showing up. But I know one thing: they weren't just passing through. Story 11. Circle Pines. And the man in white. I live in a small town in Michigan. One night, me and a few friends were out driving around, just trying to kill time. We decided to head toward this place people always talk about, Circle Pines. Locals say it's weird out there. Like really weird. It's a little community tucked into the woods. At night, it's dead quiet, and the people who live there, they just stare. You drive by their houses, and you'll see them watching from the windows, not moving, not blinking, just staring. Anyway, we're driving through with the windows down, spotlight in hand, sweeping it across the woods, just messing around, trying to scare ourselves. That's when we see him. A guy, dressed in all white, running along the side of the road, same direction we're driving. We keep the spotlight on him. He doesn't look back, doesn't flinch, just keeps running like we're not even there. And then, he's gone. 1 second he's there. The next, poof, nothing. No place for him to turn off, no cover to duck behind. We freaked hard, turned the car around and got out of there fast. I don't know who that man was, or what Circle Pines really is. But I do know this, we were being watched that night, and I haven't been back since. Story 12, The Trucker with the Knife. This one's not mine, it's my mom's, but it's messed up enough that I've never forgotten it. Back in the 70s, she was hitchhiking with my older brother, who was just 2 years old at the time. They got picked up by a trucker out on the highway. At first it seemed fine, quiet, but fine. Then she noticed the knife, a big one, strapped to his leg. She said the vibe in the cab shifted the second she saw it. He hadn't said anything threatening, but something about him felt off, so she did what she could. Started talking to my brother, laughing, keeping the mood light, anything to diffuse the tension and keep things normal. Eventually, they reached the place they'd asked to be dropped off. As she was getting out of the truck, the man leaned down toward her and said, "You should really be more careful about who you take rides from." Then he drove off. A few weeks later, she read a story in the paper. A truck driver had been arrested. He'd killed multiple hitchhikers, all women. We'll never know if it was him, but something tells me she got out just in time. Story 13, The Hands at the Door in the Hissing House. This one's 2 stories, but they both happened to me, and they've stuck with me for years. First one, I was maybe 6 or 7, couldn't sleep, like usual. So I was in my room playing SNS in the dark. Everyone else in the house was asleep. Suddenly, I got this feeling, like I was being watched. I turned around toward the doorway, and I swear to God, I saw something. There were these gray hands, 3 sets of them, reaching around the edges of the doorway, like something was peeking in, but only the hands were visible. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just shut the game off, crawled under my blanket and waited until I finally passed out. Thing is, this didn't just happen once, it happened multiple times over the years. Same hands, same doorway. I still don't know if I was dreaming, but it felt real, every single time. Second story happened years later. I was with my girlfriend at the time, visiting her tiny hometown. Real small place, maybe 100 people lived there. One of those towns where there are more abandoned houses than working ones. She took me to this rundown house she'd never been in before. Just wanted to check it out. We go inside. Total wreck. Spiderwebs, broken furniture, chunks of the wall on the floor. We walk into the kitchen, and we hear it, this low hissing sound, almost like someone whispering, or breathing through their teeth. I looked at her, she looked at me, neither of us said a word. We just got out of there as fast as we could. The weird part is, the house had been sealed up tight. Took us a minute just to get the front door open. There shouldn't have been anyone or anything inside, but something was in there. I still remember the sound, low, steady, like it was watching us the whole time. Story 14, The Man on the Bridge. It was late. I was driving home in the rain with a friend in the passenger seat. As we were coming up to this old bridge, we saw a man standing at the edge, just standing there, in the dark, not moving. My friend said, "Hey, maybe he needs help. Let's stop." I didn't even hesitate. "Hell no," I told her. This is exactly how horror movies start. So we kept driving. In the rearview mirror I could see him turning his head slowly, just watching us as we passed. Didn't wave, didn't flinch, just stared. The next day I saw something in the local news. A couple had stopped their truck in the same area to help a man standing by the road. When they pulled up next to him, he started screaming and tried to climb into the cab. He stabbed the passenger, a woman, twice with a knife. When the driver shoved him out, the man jumped into the bed of the truck and started slamming himself into the rear window until it shattered. The driver eventually grabbed a gun from the glove box and shot the guy in the shoulder before speeding off. They made it out alive, but I can't stop thinking about it. If we had stopped, that could have been us. Sometimes I feel bad, like maybe the man I saw wasn't the same one. But the timing, the place, it lines up. So yeah, I was a terrible person that night. But maybe that's the only reason I'm still here. Story 15. Army Patrol in the Abandoned Town. I was in the Army. One year, during hunting season, we got assigned to clear out deer nests from one of the remote training zones. We were rolling through these tight forest roads in a Humvee pitch blackout. It was about 4 in the morning. There's this abandoned town we had to pass through. Old buildings, empty windows. I swear I saw shadows moving inside, but nothing showed up on the lights, just stillness. We got to this little hunter shack to check it out. We were making sure everything was safe. But the whole time I had this feeling like something was watching us. We got back in the Humvee to head out. As we were creeping down the mountain trail, branches scraping the windows, I spotted a guy, just standing inches from the road's edge. We stopped, had to slam the door open just to get out through the brush, and that guy bolted, radioed it in, went a few steps into the woods with an M16 in hand, just in case. That's when I saw it. A raccoon, nailed to a tree. But it wasn't just stuck there. It had been cut open, like a science experiment. Organs still in place, like someone dissected it and pinned it up for display. Nope, we got the hell back in the Humvee and tore out of there, gravel flying behind us. But it wasn't over. On the way out, we passed through that same abandoned town again. And this time, something had changed. Cars had been moved. Windows we'd seen before now had mannequins inside, different positions, like they'd been rearranged while we were gone. I don't know what that place was, or who was still living out there, but we reported all of it. Not long after, they sealed off that whole section of forest and flattened it during Abrams tank training. It's gone now, but I still remember the feeling. Something was out there, and we weren't supposed to see it. Story 16. The church that saved us from getting lost couple years back. I was driving through the middle of nowhere with some friends. We were out in BFE, just country roads, dirt paths, no GPS signal. Every turn made things worse. We were getting more lost by the second. It was pitch black. We didn't recognize anything around us. No lights, no houses, nothing. And then all of a sudden, this church just appeared. Old white building, glowing in the headlights, like something out of a dream. My friend, who was driving, slammed the brakes and shouted, "Church." We all kind of freaked out, laughing, but honestly, it felt like a sign, like we were meant to turn around right then. So we did, found a way back, got home safe, didn't think much of it at the time. But about a year later, that same friend went with her boyfriend to visit his grandfather's grave. She comes back and tells me his grave is in a cemetery, next to that exact church. The same one we almost ran into. And here's the weird part. He'd already been dead for years by the time we saw it. I don't know what that was. Some weird coincidence. Some guardian spirit looking out for us. But I know one thing. We were lost that night. And that church, it led us home. Story 17. The Haunted Farmhouse in Bloomington. Back when I was in grad school at Indiana University, I was renting this house out in the countryside, near Bloomington. It was one of 3 houses that used to be part of an old farm. All of them were rentals now. One day, this couple who lived in one of the other houses asked me if I'd ever noticed anything weird about the place I was staying. I told them no. And they went on to say the last 2 tenants left because they thought the place was haunted. I'm a skeptic. Science background, all that. I laughed it off and didn't think much of it. Until things started happening. First, I kept hearing this tapping sound like someone smacking down a pack of cigarettes. I'd hear it at night, during the day. Sometimes it was faint, sometimes it sounded like it was right next to me. Then one night, I'm just chilling with a beer, and the shower in my bathroom suddenly turns on, full blast. I go to shut it off, and now the sink's running too. Both turned on by themselves. But the worst part, one night, I was taking the recycling down the long driveway out to the road. The house sits pretty far back, so it's a bit of a walk. I'd left the lights on inside, and when I was about 100 feet away, I saw her. There was a woman standing in my living room, plain as day. She was facing the window, doing something with her hands. Maybe smoking. I couldn't tell, but I froze, watched her walk into the kitchen. I didn't go back in. Instead, I ran to the couple's place and begged the guy to come back with me. We could both see the house from where we were. No one came out, no one went in. When we got back and searched the place, nothing. It was just empty. I ended up staying at my girlfriend's for the next week, eventually moved back in, and nothing else happened after that. But I never figured out who or what I saw that night. Story 18. The Strathfield Plaza Gunman. This was in 2005. I was out shopping at a mall, grabbing groceries. Normal day. Then I heard it. Gunshots. Screams. People were running. Shopkeeper told me someone had pulled a gun in one of the coffee shops and started shooting. I bolted, got to the car park heart racing, called my boyfriend real quick to tell him what happened. I was in full panic mode. After the call, I jumped in my car, trying to breathe, trying to calm down, and then the passenger door opened. A man got in, covered in blood, gun in his hand. He looked at me with these wild pinprick eyes. I'll never forget the look on his face, sweating, twitching, staring like he wasn't even human anymore. He pointed the gun at me and said, "Drive." I didn't even have time to think. But right then, thank God, the cops pulled into the lot. They spotted us. He jumped out of the car, climbed onto the roof, and ended his life right there. Turns out this was the Strathfield Plaza shooting. It made national news. You can still look it up. Afterward, I had to go to therapy. They gave me so many pills, I barely remember most of it. It was all just a fog. I'm okay now. I've made peace with it, mostly. But I still get nervous around loud noises. And I still live near that same mall. That same cafe's still there. It just has a different name now. Story 19. The Mark doppelganger Mark was always one of the weirder guys I'd known. He didn't care about living a normal life. He was an artist, an explorer, a scientist of things no one had words for yet. I always wondered what he would have done if he'd made it past 24. But he didn't. Some drunk guy hit him with a car one day. Just plowed into him out on Main Street. It wasn't Mark's fault. Everyone knew that. His funeral was packed. People came who barely even knew him, just heard stories or second-hand memories. It was one of those days that felt too big for real life. I almost didn't even go. It was a closed casket, and all I kept thinking was, he wouldn't have wanted this. After the funeral, I tried to keep going, tried to move on. But then, weird stuff started happening. It started small. I was driving one night. This long, empty stretch of road between our town and a bigger one. Forest on one side, farmland on the other. The kind of place that already feels like it's holding its breath. I hate roads like that. Too isolated, especially at night. The radio kept cutting in and out, which wasn't unusual for the countryside, but it still felt wrong. Eventually, I just turned it off. And that's when I saw him. About 20 or 30 feet ahead. Someone walking along the side of the road. I glanced over, just to see who'd be out there that late, and we made eye contact. It was Mark. Same hair, same little smirk he always had, same walk. I nearly drove off the road. I tried to convince myself it was just someone who looked like him, but that wasn't the only time. Every now and then, especially in the rural parts of town, I'd catch glimpses of him, just walking. Always that same Mark-like smirk on his face. One time, I was working at my uncle's farm for the summer. I looked out toward the road, and there he was again. Mark, or something like him, just walking along. He only looked at me once. Even from a distance, I knew he was smiling. That's when the paranoia started. I stopped going near that part of town. But the worst part came when I had to drive down the same road where I first saw him. I tried to get out of it, came up with every excuse I could, but there was no avoiding it. By now I had a car with a CD player, and I remember the exact song that was playing when it happened. Jesus Is Just All Right, by the Doobie Brothers. My car broke down, no warning, just a shudder, and then silence as I pulled off to the side. I didn't know what to do. Called my mom. She got in touch with people who could help. I just sat there, alone, staring into the dark. I must have nodded off for a few minutes. When I opened my eyes, there was someone walking in front of my car. It was him. Mark, or something that looked like him. He didn't touch me, didn't speak, but I got out of the car anyway. I had to know. I called out, "Mark?" He stopped, turned around, and started walking back toward me. We were maybe 15 feet apart when I really saw his face. It wasn't Mark. The face looked like his, but not right. Like a mask that didn't fit. The skin sagged weirdly, like it was just barely attached. The eyes were hollow, just black, empty. And that smirk. It wasn't a smirk. His mouth was frozen in this twisted expression, like a puppet or someone who'd had a stroke. His lips started to move, slow, out of sync with the voice. And then he spoke. "You idiot. Mark's dead." I don't remember what happened next. I must have fainted. When I came to, some guy named Ed was shaking me awake. He smelled like corn chips and barely paid attention while I tried to explain what happened. After that, I stopped telling people. No one would believe it. I could barely believe it. But I've never driven down that road again. And I haven't seen him since. Whoever or whatever that was. I know one thing for sure. It wasn't Mark. Story 20. The hitchhiker before the local murder. My friend was driving me home one night. She lives in town, but I'm way out in the country, so it's a bit of a drive. We were almost to my place when we saw him. There was this guy standing in the middle of the road, not off to the side with his thumb out like a normal hitchhiker. No, he was right in the middle, just standing there with his arm out like he expected us to stop. We slowed down, stared at him. He didn't look especially scary. Average height, average build. Blue shirt, jeans, black backpack, slung over one shoulder. But something about him felt off. My friend and I, both teenage girls, decided there was no way we were stopping for this guy. So she swerved around him, and we kept going. The entire way to my house, we didn't say much. We were both a little shaken. She ended up spending the night because we didn't want to risk her having to drive back and pass that same guy again. And then the next day, we saw it on the news. A man had been stabbed in his house. He lived just up the road from us. My parents actually knew him. His neighbors said they'd seen him outside earlier that day, talking to someone. A guy in a blue shirt. We never found out if it was the same man we saw that night, but I still think about it. That guy, standing alone in the middle of the road, like he was waiting for his next ride. Story 21. Ghost trucker. And the truck stop reveal. I was hitchhiking. Usual stuff. Thumb out, long stretch of highway. Eventually, this guy in a convertible picks me up. He seemed cool. We talked, shared some stories. But after a while, he got sleepy and asked if I'd take the wheel for a bit. So I started driving. We hit this winding road. I took a curve too fast, and nearly missed the turn. He got mad. Real mad. Told me to pull over. Said he didn't trust me behind the wheel, and left me right there on the side of the road. Now I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere. Fog's rolling in. I keep hitchhiking. And then this semi-truck pulls over. Lady behind the wheel. She's older, friendly, real laid-back kind of vibe. Tells me to hop in. We drive a while, and she starts telling me this creepy ghost story. I don't remember all the details, just that she was a really good storyteller. Kinda eerie. At the end of it, she makes this scary face, just for laughs. Caught me totally off guard. Super effective. Eventually she lets me off at a truck stop. I go inside, get some food, and start chatting with a few of the people there. I tell them about the woman who gave me a lift, the story, the scary face, the whole thing. They just look at me. Then one of them says, "You know that woman died like 10 years ago, right?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't believe it at first. Still not sure I do. But I'll tell you this, whoever she was, ghost or not, she got me where I needed to go. Story 22. Night funeral in the cornfield. I was driving from Wichita to Omaha to visit my parents. By the time I hit the cornfields, it was already pitch black, around 10 p.m. Just miles and miles of fields in every direction. Then I saw it. A house up ahead, all lit up in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down out of curiosity. That's when I saw him. Some bald guy in a full suit walked out the front door. Just stepped outside, like it was the middle of the day. Weird. But I figured maybe he was heading somewhere, even if it was almost 10:30 at night. Then a woman came out behind him. She was dressed in black, from the dress to the veil, like she'd come straight from a funeral. That's when it hit me. Something about this wasn't right. I slammed the gas and kept driving. 10 minutes later, a funeral hearse passed me going the opposite direction. I looked over at the driver. It was the same guy, same bald head, same suit. I can't explain it. The whole thing felt like I'd driven through something I wasn't supposed to see. Why would anyone be holding a funeral at nearly 11 at night, in the middle of nowhere? I still think about that house sometimes, and that guy in the suit. Story 23. The Grapevine Detour and the snow-covered signs. If you're from Northern or Central California, you know there's really only one way to get into LA. The Grapevine. It's a long mountain pass, kind of a pain, but it gets you there. Last winter, I was driving to LA. It was around 7 p.m. when I found out the Grapevine was closed due to snow. No big deal. I figured I'd take the detour through Bakersfield like everyone else. Except, traffic was crawling. Hours went by. It was almost midnight, and I got this bright idea. Maybe I could cut across using some back roads. I remembered a path from years ago, and figured it might save me time. Should have known better. I took the turn, and suddenly I was out in the middle of nowhere. No streetlights, snow still falling, total darkness. The road started getting icy. A couple bridges made my car shudder. That's when it hit me. If I broke down out here, I was done. No signal, no people, just me and a snow-covered back road. Then it got worse. I started seeing road signs, but they were all blacked out. Not broken, not worn out, just covered in something so you couldn't read them. Like someone didn't want you to know where you were going. I passed sign after sign. All the same, completely unreadable. I genuinely thought I was going to end up in some backwoods horror movie. Eventually I gave up, turned around, drove all the way back, just to rejoin the same detour I tried to avoid in the first place. Got into LA, around 5 a.m. Later I realized the signs weren't vandalized, or blacked out on purpose. They were just frozen over. Snow and ice had completely covered them. Still, in the moment, it felt like something or someone was trying to keep me lost. Story 24. The Wisconsin Hodog Hunt. This was one of those family vacations up to northern Wisconsin. We'd gone up there for the umpteenth time. There's not a whole lot up there, just woods and local legends. One of them is the Hodog, supposedly some kind of monster thing that roams the woods. Anyway, I thought it'd be fun to go Hodog hunting, mostly just as a joke. So we left some food at a dead-end road, popcorn I think, and parked nearby with the headlights off. We sat in the dark. Then we started hearing stuff. Footsteps. Movement in the trees. Not just casual wildlife rustling, but something heavier. Something that seemed to be circling us. I turned the lights on. Popcorn was gone. Bag still there. Whatever took it didn't hang around. It wasn't a raccoon or deer or bear. Anyone who's been out in the woods knows. They don't leave that fast. They linger. They watch. But this thing didn't. Later that night, I took my dog out to the backyard. We've got this big open field behind the house. The dog goes to do his thing, but then he freezes, ears up, tail straight, locked onto something out in the dark. I laugh, think maybe it's a stray cat, or something. Seen a few around. But then I call to him, "Come on, man, do your business." He snaps out of it and finishes. I go, "Let's head back inside." But he's still looking out into that field. So I give him a little nudge. That's when his ears go down, tail up, and he starts growling. My dog never growls. Then out of nowhere he lunges forward like he's about to attack something. Nearly rips my arm out of the socket. Then just as suddenly, he whips around and pulls me hard toward the house. We get inside, and he goes straight to the window. Doesn't bark, doesn't move, just sits there, staring, wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, didn't even want to be on the couch with me like usual. Just sat there, locked on whatever was out there, like he knew it wasn't gone. That was the freakiest part. Because my dog, he's the sweetest, chillest thing in the world, and that night, he didn't act like himself at all. Story 25, Babysitter's Haunted House and the Rocking Chair. I think I was around 8, maybe 10. My mom had this friend who used to babysit us every day after school. She said her house was haunted. You know how adults say that kind of stuff sometimes, but as a kid you don't know if it's a joke or not. Well, she was dead serious. She told me the answering machine would play messages by itself. Lights in the basement would turn off and on without anyone near them. But the one that got me was the rocking chair, this big one in the middle of the living room. Said it would just start moving on its own. Not like creaking a little, like swaying. Still, I didn't think much of it at the time. One day it was just the babysitter and me at the house. Her husband was at work, and she didn't have any kids. We were downstairs when the light suddenly turned off. She walked over and turned it back on. No big deal. Then it turned off again. At that point, I just bolted upstairs. I was done. She didn't even react. Just brushed it off like it happened all the time. Later we sat down for lunch and went into the living room to watch TV. That's when I saw it. The rocking chair dead center of the room was swaying. Hard, like someone had just gotten up. Then there was this thud from the corner. Not loud, but just wrong. I froze. Didn't even want to check what it was. After that, I couldn't be alone in that house again. For the rest of the year, whenever my mom dropped me off, I made sure I stuck to her like glue. And that rocking chair, I never looked at it the same again. Story 26, The Family Haunted by Legs. I've got a few stories from over the years. Could just be weird coincidences. But they all connect in a way that makes me think otherwise. It started when I was about 5 or 6. I was at my aunt's new house, playing on the floor with my baby cousin, right next to this massive wardrobe. We were just sitting there with toys when my mom came in and told us to come to the kitchen. As we left the room, that wardrobe, this heavy solid thing, suddenly tipped forward and slammed flat on its front, right on the exact spot where we'd just been sitting. There was no reason for it to fall. No earthquake. No one bumped it. My mom and aunt were both freaked out. Still talk about it sometimes. Years passed. I was about 13 or 14 when something else happened. My mom was in the kitchen, just grabbing a drink. All of a sudden, I hear this smash. I run in and see her picking up a broken beer bottle. The weird part, the bottle had been on top of the fridge, way at the back, behind some stuff. She swears it flew off by itself. That was the second big thing. Then a couple years later, 15 or 16, I got a job working in this huge hotel, mostly in the cottages. One day I was making a bed, lifting the sheets. As the sheet fell, I caught a glimpse of something in the room. A pair of legs, just standing there, not attached to anything. No upper body, just legs. They looked like a solid shadow, like you could reach out and touch them, but no detail. No shoes, no pants, just dark, featureless legs. The sheet finished falling, and they were still there. They didn't move, just stood. Then they turned and calmly walked across the room, right through the bathroom wall. I quit that job the same day, handed my notice in to my granddad, who worked there as a gardener. I was done. But it didn't end there. A couple years after that, I came home from work, and my mom said she'd seen something. She was walking upstairs earlier in the day, and watched a pair of legs walk across the hallway. Same thing I saw. No body, no face, just legs. And the weirdest part, I never told her about what I saw at the hotel. She told me her story first. We're convinced, whatever this is, it's not just following me. It's following our family. Story 27. The child used for drug smuggling. This wasn't my story directly. It's something my sister told me. Said it happened to a relative of a friend. I know that's how a lot of these things start, but the way she told it stuck with me. So the story goes like this. A couple, an aunt and uncle of my sister's friend, went down to Mexico on vacation. Took their toddler with them. They were spending time at the beach, relaxing, and let the kid nap in the RV while they hung out nearby. But when they came back, their child was gone. Just gone. They searched everywhere, called the cops, filed a missing person report. Days turned into weeks, and nothing. They couldn't bring themselves to leave. Stayed in Mexico for months, hoping for a miracle. Eventually, though, they had to go home. When they finally started driving back to the US, they hit traffic at the border checkpoint. You know, the kind where Border Patrol checks cars for smuggling. And that's when the aunt saw it. In another car, a few lanes over, she spotted a kid in the back seat that looked exactly like hers. She panicked, climbed out of her car, ran across the lanes, and yanked open the other car's passenger door before anyone could stop her. It was her child. Same hair. Same face, same everything. She reached out, but the head tilted back, unnaturally, and the neck split open. The child had been hollowed out, turned into a shell to smuggle something, probably drugs over the border. I don't know if it's true. Honestly, I kind of hope it's not. But I can't stop thinking about it. Because the worst part, it sounds like something someone might actually do. Story 28. The LARP summoning gone wrong. I'm not even sure if this counts as creepy, but it definitely stuck with me. So I was 17 at the time, big into fantasy, tabletop roleplay stuff. Decided to go to a LARP event, live action roleplay. You dress up, get assigned a character, act it out in the woods, that kind of thing. I was playing an NPC, meaning I worked for the game masters, and helped run the experience for others. One night, I got told a group of players was doing a ritual in the woods. They were trying to summon a demon. The game masters handed me a costume that fit, wings, horns, dark red face paint, the whole bit, told me to go out there and be the demon they summoned. So I walked out into the forest, late at night. It was dark, but not pitch black. I didn't need a flashlight or anything. I wandered for maybe 10 minutes before I started to hear something. Chanting. People in a circle around a fire, robes, masks, some of them moving in weird patterns like a ritual dance. I thought, all right, time to go all in. So I crept up as close as I could without them seeing me. Then I jumped out from the shadows and shouted in the deepest voice I could muster. You have summoned me. Now tell me what is your bidding. They all screamed and ran, just bolted into the woods in every direction. I stood there, alone, in front of the fire, waited maybe 20 minutes, thinking someone might come back, maybe laugh, say good one, give me instructions. Nope, no one. Eventually, I wandered back to camp. Game Master saw me and asked why I was there. Told him what happened. He just looked confused. Turns out, the players had been out in the woods for almost an hour, still waiting for their demon to show up. So whoever I scared, wasn't them. To this day, I don't know who those people were. Story 29. The Thing in the Marshes. This happened around December of last year. It was pretty late at night. I'd driven my car out to this quiet viewpoint that overlooked a creek, middle of nowhere. No other cars, no streetlights, just me. the engine ticking as it cooled down, and the sound of water moving somewhere below. I was just sitting there, taking in the stillness. Then I saw something. At first it was just a shape, moving in the mud along the edge of the creek, walking low to the ground, on all fours. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. Then I flipped on the headlights. That's when it turned and looked right at me. Its eyes glowed yellow, and I don't mean reflective like an animal caught in headlights. I mean glowing. The second it saw the lights, it bolted, ran on all fours straight across the creek bed, and vanished into the marshes to the left. And it was fast, way too fast. I wasn't sticking around to find out what it was. I floored it, took off doing 60 through those dark roads just to get home. Later I tried looking it up. Closest thing I could find was maybe a big cat like a puma. But this thing, it didn't move like a cat, didn't feel like one, either. It felt like something else entirely. Something that saw me before I saw it, and didn't like being seen. Alright fellas, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. We went off the map tonight. Some real strange stuff out there. If you enjoyed the ride or want to share, drop a comment or hit subscribe. This has been From the Depths of the Board. See you next time.